chat about in this video is the concept that we have a body, but we are not a body. And this really ties into also the notion of reincarnation. So a lot of religions obviously incorporate this idea of reincarnation, that the soul lives on, that there's karmic cycles, and also at a certain point, even in Christian history, there was elements of reincarnation in the doctrine, okay? So again, I want to pull from some very significant experiences that I've had personally, and also things that, again, my family members have experienced. So two really, really interesting things that I want to share in this video was that both my grandmother and my great-grandmother actually had very profound near-death experiences. And they started talking to me about this when I was a very small child and explaining to me essentially what had happened to them. Now, both of them had these experiences, middle-aged, and what happened was they lost consciousness and basically were not exactly pronounced dead, but their heart had flatlined. There was no life in the body anymore. And so my great-grandma, the first time that I heard of the story, my great-grandma was talking to me about being in the operating room, having the doctors, trying to resuscitate her, and floating above her body. So she could actually look down, she could see what all the doctors were doing, she could see what the nurses were doing. And she thought it was really funny. Like, she was looking at her little body and really not so much wanting to go back down there. And also, again, like a lot of near-death experiences, she could kind of float outside of the hospital room and see things outside the hospital, and all of these things were confirmed for her. And she also saw a very bright white light, and she would tell this story to me over and over again. I always thought it was super fascinating, and I probably asked, as a young girl, great grandma, tell me this story again. And she said that, again, she saw this extremely beautiful white light, and that she just said it was like the most incredible feeling of love, and she could actually see sort of the shadows of people down the tunnel into the light. And her daughter, so my grandma, who's now passed away, also experienced the same thing. So she had an out-of-body experience. It was in the hospital where, again, she was not conscious. She was not essentially in her body. Her soul had popped out of her body. And again, she also told me this very interesting story. So when I was a little girl, we used to walk through the cemeteries all the time, and I would ask her questions about death and dying and what was going on, because I was a curious little kid. And she would always, again, bring up this story about being in a hospital room or in an operating room above her body, and again, listening to the conversations of the doctors and the nurses and seeing everything on the table and what was going on, and the fact that I think she talked about losing a lot of blood. Again, I can't really verify the story because both my great-grandma and my grandma are now passed away. And I don't even know, and this is kind of a weird thing as well, my great-grandma told me these stories in her later years. She wasn't around very long, so I was seeing her at an extended care facility. I would get dropped there and we'd have little tea parties. And then when I was walking with my grandma, her daughter, she would tell me her story of her near-death experience. I actually don't know if either of them ever shared the experiences with each other, because I never really talked to them together about it, but they both had very, very similar experiences. And myself as well. So this is how I'm going to bridge this together with my own experiences of, the paranormal or the other side of the veil, because again, it was very important for me to have these conversations with these very, very amazing women, these mentors in my life, because I was trying to understand at that time, when I was a small child, my own experiences with what was going on consciously with me day to day in in terms of what I was experiencing. So again, all my entire life, I've always been able to be sort of clairvoyant or be able to see energies. It comes and goes. Sometimes I can see it very clearly as like light beings and actual entities. There's been certain times where in my life where it has been like pervasive. Like I remember times where it was kind of like that scene from Ghost, where they were all around my bed and I wanted them to go away and I couldn't turn it off. And I was just like, whoa, this is just way too many spirit energies around me and I don't really know how to deal with it. And for me, it just felt like, again, like a whole bunch of voices trying to give me information and messages. And one particular time, actually, I was living in British Columbia, and one of our neighbors, the mother had just died. And this was a kind of a really, I don't want to say creepy, but very, very real experience that I had. Is the mother was actually one of the spirits in the room, and she was talking to me and she was telling me, that her daughter's going to be okay, and there was a message from her family and all these things. But actually it was super strange because I didn't find out that the mother had died until that next day when I saw the husband and the daughter, and I gave them this message. And of course they were super emotional, and was a very it was a confirmation for me that obviously what I was seeing was like a real thing, but it also made me a little bit uncomfortable and a little bit nervous and scared in terms of like seeing that kind of stuff, right? And so for a long time, I really pushed those experiences away, and I really didn't want to have that in my field, and it became really uncomfortable. And when I was little, it was very pervasive. So it was daily, it was, a lot during the evening, even during the day. And again, I found it kind of uncomfortable, and I didn't really understand what it was, but I definitely had this, early on realization that I perceived a lot more than the average person, certainly more than my parents. Neither one of my parents had this sort of perceptual ability. And although I've had, I think there's other individuals in my family that also have this type of perception, the way that it was treated with them was to put them on psychiatric medications and to just completely discount what they were saying and treat it as like, this doesn't make any sense. None of us see this, so therefore you must not have, you might have a few screws loose. So again, for myself, I worked very diligently to push all of these things, to push all of these things out of the forefront of my experience, to experience them as little as humanly possible, because again, it's quite intrusive in terms of one's daily existence and, just trying to do your life in three-dimensional reality. But nonetheless, again, it's sort of cyclical for me, and it does pop up and crop up, and there's an increase in me feeling the energies or energies of things that maybe other people can't see. And so I had a lot of it pre-COVID, so I had quite an intensive experience before COVID hit, and sort of almost premonitions of something happening, something on a global scale. And then again, it was very confirmed for me when that happened. I was like, wow, okay, so I'm really perceiving something that is trying to communicate with me. And again, I've started with greater frequency having these sort of, I don't know if you want to call them premonitions or just feelings of energy, increasing as well in the past several months, especially since one of my grandmas passed away. So it's why, again, that I'm sort of starting to talk about this stuff, and why I've decided to start my channel and just really start speaking my truth, because I think when we do this, when we're living authentically, we allow others to come forth with their truth and talk about their experiences. And I mean, near-death experiences have been documented for such a long time. So we know that there's something going on there. And for me, it's really, really peaceful for me to know that two people in my family was extremely close to both had these very poignant near-death experiences and really essentially saw the portal to heaven and really experienced that. And these are people that, again, I know that they wouldn't lie, they wouldn't make this up, there'd be no reason for them to make this up. And I've actually asked other family members about those very questions when I was a little girl, because I was talking to my grandma and my great-grandma, and then I was talking to aunts and different people, and the people that hadn't had these near-death experiences kind of gave me the traditional answer, like, you know what, we really don't know. We don't know what happens when you pass away, and, you know, we kind of hope for the best, and hopefully there's something else out there, but there wasn't really any concrete answers. And again, because I was having these sort of transcendental, very spiritual experiences from a young age, I really needed confirmation for my little brain as to what was going on and how I was able to perceive all of these energies. And one of the things that I was taught, and again, so when these different energies would come and speak to me, especially when I was young, I was very much taught this principle that we are borrowing this body in our incarnation. So while we're here, we are kind of like in an avatar body. And I mean, lots of different people talk about this, lots of mediums, lots of different channels and psychic mediums and that kind of thing. And so again, this isn't new stuff, okay? It's just basically my version of what information I was given. And again, so we reside in any given body, and we are here to essentially utilize this three-dimensional machine as a mechanism of learning. So it helps us as a soul to be able to learn these various lessons. And the other thing that, again, this isn't necessarily in line specifically with Christianity, but I don't think that it's a non-Christian ideology, in a wrong way either. And I'm not particular to any particular dogma. Again, I believe in unconditional love, and I believe that the only way to unity is unification of all of the people on planet Earth, to understand that essentially pieces of the puzzle have been given to each culture. Aboriginal cultures are very connected with the land, with Mother Earth, in understanding that piece of the pie. And, Eastern cultures are very in line with this oneness energy of really coming to this equilibrium and this sort of expansive energy. And then we have the Middle Eastern cultures, which again really have this idea of the chakra system and the karmic system, okay, that exists. And then we have Christianity, which really is about that Christ consciousness and the different aspects of how the universe exists in duality. So this idea of the resurrection and the descent, okay? And really, if you sort of layer all of these different pieces together, when you combine them all, you get a beautiful story, sort of a tapestry of what is essentially going on. And then you also have to look at traditional ways of thinking. So when we go back to cultures before the birth of Christ, and Egyptian and Grecian cultures, and some of these the Assyrians, and all of the different tribes of people that existed that predated our modern times, we have a lot of information about the way that they perceived consciousness and the journey here on planet Earth, and then what happens in the afterlife and beyond, and the journey of human beings in terms of our place in the cosmic landscape. And those things have always really, really interested me, and I've studied a lot about them, and it's been a passion for me my entire life. And likely because, again, I was trying to understand the experiences that I've always encountered in terms of that energetic field or the quantum field, and how also energies pop in and out of existence, or what is beyond the body? What is the mechanism of the soul, and what are these things that seem to be able to be perceived by this sort of sixth sense, okay? And so this concept that we are not our bodies, that we have a body, is really actually something that can be super helpful in terms of our daily life and existence. And it helps us somewhat as well to detach from fear, to detach from the mechanism of suffering, because if we understand that essentially a soul's progression, so when the spark of any given soul is born, that soul starts a journey throughout the cosmos, and it's a journey of learning, and it's a journey of oneness, because remember, any soul, any being, or the essence that we are, is always connected to the divine, to all that is, because you cannot separate yourself from everything. You are part of everything. So that's something that it's a very safe feeling to know that you can never fall. You can never be detached, even though you feel very singular in a body. Everything that is God, that universal force, will never detach itself from you, and you're always held in its grace and its beauty and its incredible vastness, okay? But when we incarnate, and again, as a soul progresses, it accumulates karma. So it's learning. And again, karma isn't a bad thing. It is just the way that each individual soul kind of works through the labyrinth of existence and learns its core frequency, learns what it is meant to learn. And again, it's not really predestined. So each soul is learning in a very organic way, and it's not something that is necessarily known. It's always recalibrating. So with our karmic baggage, which isn't really a bad thing, it's our karmic learning cycle is a better way to put it. We're taking all of the things that we've done, so things we've done to others, ways in which we've misinterpreted things. So it's like that teaching, they know not what they do. That would be very much in line with a younger soul not really knowing what it's doing. It's learning, it's experiencing. It's like a kid in the sandbox playing around, throwing sand everywhere, okay? And then there's also the golden rule, do unto others as you would have done unto you. So again, very interesting in and of the sense that as we kind of realize what some of these very core teachings mean, it allows us to move into a space of non-judgment, okay? Because that is essentially the goal as we're working ourselves through the karmic system, to fall into a place eventually of realizing that with each and every incarnation, there's more learning, there's more wisdom that comes, and with more wisdom and more learning, more unconditional love starts being acclimated into each individual soul's essence, and to a point where we actually can kind of detach from the body. And I don't mean in like a creepy way, but we just understand that whatever kind of human suit we have on, and it's not always a human suit. Sometimes you're an animal, sometimes you're a tree, sometimes you're a plant, whatever it is. You may not even be incarnating on this particular planet, but each and every incarnation, you're going to learn a little bit more about the nature of beingness. And through that mechanism as well, God, the creator, everything that exists, or the quantum field, however you want to understand it, is also learning as well. Because again, there's intelligent design to all of this, okay? And this is how we can really bridge that gap between all peoples, because even someone that is, maybe expressing or saying, I'm purely atheist, I only believe in science. Well, science is starting to prove that there is an innate intelligence to the field, okay? So maybe you don't believe there's a guy on a white fluffy cloud with a beard looking down and watching and judging everybody. I don't really believe that either. That doesn't make any sense, okay? But when we start to have a more intelligent semblance of what this God source creation energy is, we can really realize how we fit into the picture, and how, again, having a relationship with divine consciousness is actually something that really can feel wonderful and safe, and that there are things beyond our three-dimensional reality. Okay, so again, if you are having any type of anxiety, because again, a lot of times people are anxious or they have fears, and pretty much every fear is a primal fear based on the fact that we're afraid of dying, or we're afraid of the nothingness, or that we will cease to exist. I mean, if it's a fear of spiders, the core fear is a spider is going to bite you and you're going to get hurt. Or if it's a fear of bears, it's that the bear is going to attack you. Or if it's a fear of heights, you're going to fall from that high place. Or whatever it is, it's usually really connected to the idea of death, and the fear of death at its core is just the fear of nothingness. So you becoming absolutely nothing with no memories and like you never were, okay? And when we can understand that due to the mechanism of the quantum field and the expression of what you are, that you are a body, but you are consciousness also beyond the body, it becomes actually kind of an exciting thing. And you realize that, okay, you get to experience this lifetime with this body playing out on the cinema of, again, this particular lifetime. And it's not, again, such a negative thing to experience, and it's not something to be afraid of. Then you allow yourself to play a little bit more with the prospect of living. You become less afraid of judgment, and you become less afraid of being yourself, because if you realize that what you are is eternal, and that you will continue on even when the body dies, and things like so many, millions of near-death experiences that are verifiable and that have happened to people. And again, even my experiences, I didn't die per se, but because I've been able to have this perception of a reality beyond, what most people can see, I know definitively within myself what I experience, okay? And I know that I'm a very logical thinker, that I'm very systematic about things. I am, even though I do have an artistic side to me, I still need to verify things. And I, even in the landscape of my learning, I went to university and I took psychology and abnormal psych, and I had to in every way investigate the brain and try to figure out, what was the scientific reason that some of these things might be happening. And I still never came to any concrete outcome of what I was experiencing, other than it is what it is. It is this extra sensory perception, and I'm okay with that. And it doesn't make me a bad person. It doesn't make me anything but somebody that just kind of has a sixth sense. And I'm now very, very comfortable and confident with it. And that's why I'm talking about it in a really, really open way. Okay. And so if we think about this principle that we are not the body and we're here to experience this lifetime, how does it work? Like what is the end goal, or what's the goal of humanity in terms of planet Earth and our incarnations? Well, obviously, eventually we want to get to that point where we can get off of the wheel of karma. It takes quite many, okay, lifetimes. I'm talking thousands of lifetimes to work your way usually through the karmic cycle, because we build up this karma, we learn from it, lifetime after lifetime. We're working out this karma with the soul family. So we have a soul family that is always with us, and then we also have other souls that will be transient, coming in and out, that will be essentially on the stage playing out these lessons with us so that we can learn. And as we get to the end stages of incarnating in this school of karmic, the karmic cycle, we get to this point where, again, we exit this dimensional reality and we move to a higher octave, and we experience more of a unity consciousness, and we no longer are in that karmic expression, okay? And you definitely will feel this. You'll know it internally very, very at a very core level from the beginning of your birth, if you're planning to do this as a soul. Again, I'm talking like, even before I was like 1 year old, I knew this fact about this lifetime. And I don't know how I knew it, but I very much knew that this was going to be an incarnation that would be my last incarnation with this really three-dimensional body form. And what it kind of feels like is you'll have a specific knowing that you are on a journey going towards home. And it's a feeling that will have been with you from birth, generally, okay? That's how I've experienced it. And you really feel like, again, I was always really specifically on a certain, I don't want to say mission, but there was things that I had to undo and make right in this lifetime very poignantly and in a very big way, okay? And so some of the cultures will call this dharma, which is like the idea of good karma. But you'll also have a soul knowing that when you've kind of done this equalization, so when there's an equalization or the 0 point energy once you've cleared that karmic cycling, you'll know it. You'll just feel it within yourself, and it's kind of like a switch happens, and you kind of realize that you are traveling on this journey home, and that you have a very deep core knowing in your soul that you won't need to incarnate again in this type of a body. And again, this, for somebody that is watching this that doesn't have this sense, this is going to sound totally ridiculous, but for individuals or souls that are incarnating and understand this will make total sense, and it'll just be another confirmation that somebody out there experiences this as well. And generally for me, it's always going to be about helping teach the understanding of the laws of creation and unconditional love. And that's usually, again, what happens in your kind of end stage lifetimes. And so sometimes, you may have to come back a few times, but again, the goal of the soul that is coming in their sort of last incarnation is to hopefully figure that out in their last lifetime. And if for some reason, you don't get it right, or I don't get it right, I also know that, hey, there's always more lifetimes to come, so I'm not gonna like stress myself out about it, but I also want to be aware that I'm doing the best job I can possibly do to tie up all loose ends, essentially, if that makes sense. So again, I wanted to kind of end this video, I want to round it out, but really what I'm trying to drive home is that when you're in this body, again, enjoy the experience of life. Try not to take it too seriously. The aging process, the transition process, it's all very natural. It doesn't have to be a scary thing. The end of one's life or that transition into the spiritual realm can be a very gentle, beautiful experience. And also that knowingness that there is another side, and our loved ones that have passed away or no longer are residing in a body are still very much there on the spiritual side of things, and they're doing exactly what they're supposed to do in the spiritual realms. And it's our job to, again, just learn our lessons as gracefully and eloquently as we can in this lifetime, and really spread joy and love and light and unconditional love as much as we possibly can in this lifetime. So again, wishing you guys a fabulous evening, and hopefully you enjoyed a little bit of this insight and a few of the stories from my family and from my childhood.